Hey, it's NPR's Book of the Day. I'm Andrew Limbong. Talk to Nate Silver, the now famous elections forecaster, and in his view, there is a shared personality type among those who excel at poker playing, sports betting, VC investing, and blue chip art collecting. And he writes about this type of guy, and yeah, it's usually a guy, in his new book, On the Edge, The Art of Risking Everything. And in this interview with Here and Now Scott Tong, he raises one dichotomy, the risk taker versus the risk averse. But then he also mentions a related but slightly different dichotomy, the individual versus the collective. Find out how all of these opposing forces play off of each other after the break.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Sony Pictures Classics, presenting Between the Temples, a new comedy starring Jason Schwartzman as a cantor losing his voice and his faith when his grade school music teacher becomes his new bat mitzvah student, now playing only in theaters. This message comes from Progressive and its Name Your Price tool. Say how much you want to pay for car insurance, and they'll show coverage options within your budget. Visit Progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law.
Remember the movie Moneyball, where this contrarian geek working for the Oakland A's baseball team clashes with the traditional scouts who go with, their eyes, their feel? Well, the new book seeks to understand these two camps on a much broader scale. And it concludes that the data nerds, the quants who take big risks, are winning in American society. And the author is a bit of a quant himself. Nate Silver, you know the name, he's an election modeler. And his new book is On the Edge, The Art of Risking Everything. And Nate Silver joins me now. Welcome.
Hey, how are you?
I'm well. You argue there's this group of elites in society who belong to what you call the river. Describe these people.
So the river are people who take calculated risks for a living, mostly in quantitative types of risks. So involving finance or poker is kind of like the part of the river. And they combine two traits, one of which is that very Moneyball-ish analytical approach, but also being extremely competitive. These are people who want to win to the point of sometimes being independent-minded to the point of contrarian, where they think they're different than the rest of society and are trying to arbitrage that for their advantage.
Yeah, well, your book goes into, many inhabitants of the river, Elon Musk, Sam Bankman-Fried, so yes, contrarian, yes, controversial. But I want to ask you about the scientist who helped develop the mRNA vaccine, Dr. Catalin Carrico. How is she an example of the river?
So she's an extremely courageous person. She fled communist Hungary with a couple hundred British pounds stuffed into a teddy bear to emigrate to the United States. She kind of toiled in obscurity in academia for many years, was demoted, was threatened with deportation, because mRNA was kind of too much of a high risk, high upside bet. When I spoke with her, she thought that it wouldn't be completed in her lifetime, that she would lay the groundwork for future scientists to pursue mRNA, but that she would never see the benefits of it.
Oh, wow. So high risk, super long payout, maybe beyond a lifetime.
Yeah, I mean, and she's older. She achieved all this notoriety and the Nobel Prize and the Breakthrough Prize in her late 60s, but a remarkable person who says, yeah, I really don't care what everyone else thinks about me. I'm a scientist, and if I am ostracized or whatever else, it just gives me more time to go to my lab and work on vaccines.
Nate, you contrast the river people with what you call the village, and the villagers include professors and journalists, and you argue that they are risk averse. I wonder if you have an example.
I think there are a couple of prominent cases recently. One is, moving away from offending people or moving away from free speech. Some of the things that you might call cancel culture or wokeness is also a sign, I think, of risk aversion, where in the village, the community is important and not the individual. And you don't want to offend people, and you don't want to have the wrong people saying the wrong things, whereas these Silicon Valley guys are brash, say whatever on their mind that might extend sometimes into things that aren't that accurate or are offensive. But individual versus kind of collective is a big axis of conflict.
Yeah. One interesting thing I've heard you talk about when comparing the risk-taking kind of members of the river versus the village is betting markets, which is, the province of the river types. And the betting markets have more money betting that the origin of COVID-19 was a lab leak. And we know there seem to be few academics arguing this, not a whole lot of coverage. What does that betting market, you think, tell us?
The lab leak is politically inconvenient in certain ways. It would impact US China relations. It might make scientists look bad, but in the river, we don't care about that stuff. We just care about getting the answer right. And I think we use a process called Bayesian reasoning from Bayes' theorem, where you think, okay, so this is the one place in the world that's doing this type of coronavirus research. And yeah, it would be a pretty big coincidence if this virus happened to first emerge in the city that's the most prominent place on Earth for this type of research. Now, you can counter that by saying, well, it's also a pretty big coincidence that it first emerges, at least apparently, in a wet market where you have lots of animal species and you might have a zoonosis origin. So different people have different views about which one of these two unlikely coincidences is more unlikely, but that's why people tend to have an open mind about it.
You argue in this book, Nate Silver, that the people in the river, right, these often contrarian database risk takers, are, in your words, winning in society, winning in influence. What do you mean?
Well, economically, finance and tech are kind of the two signature industries, and they keep growing as fractions of the US economy. And also things like everything from like baseball to the way Uber or DoorDash does pricing, it's all algorithmic. They are capturing more producer surplus and not consumer surplus. It probably contributes on some level to inflation. Actually, they understand how to like make me, click the button for the extra fries in my McDonald's order or whatever. So yeah, there are, the capitalist economy, and I'm pro free market for the most part. But it's very good at capturing profit from potential inefficiencies. And as more and more people graduate with data science degrees and we get more and more information, more data, then they tend to use that to their financial advantage.
Yeah. The river, as you write, it's about economic growth, which is kind of just how we live, right? I mean, growth over time, over the centuries, has delivered electricity, refrigeration, vaccines, internet, computers in our pockets, all those things. And you write and talk about life being so much better, since, say, the 18th century, industrialization. I was based in China for several years, saw this improvement in real time. People pulled out of poverty by mostly these market forces. Are you suggesting, that people in the village tend to miss this, maybe focus too much on the distribution of the pie rather than how much it's growing?
For sure. Yeah. Look, I think a lot of people don't know the economic history of how, until roughly the late 18th century, around 1776, ironically, when we had the American Revolution, world GDP was not growing. It was just, progress was considered kind of a foreign concept. And then all of a sudden you have on the one hand, the Industrial Revolution, on the other hand, the emergence of liberal democracy. This is an important part of that. Liberalism implies it's not used the way that sometimes it's used as a synonym for left or progressive. It means concepts like the free market and the rule of law. It means also, though, typically it's not totally libertarian. It means you have a welfare state. And when you protect people's downside, and this is the ideal version of it, not always followed, but protect people's downside and give people rights to compete and the dignity to compete, and then the winners win a lot, and then they share some of the profits with the losers, so to speak. That's been a kind of miraculous system for the past couple centuries. Now, you do have more wealth inequality, at least in industrialized countries, although relative to the world, it's a little bit more complicated with places like China and India doing much better than they once did. And the newer technologies, so things like social media, I think has deeply ambiguous effects on, is it net good for the world, or crypto, for example, or AI. The people who are developing AI will say, we think the good outweighs the bad, but also it might kill all of us if it gets unaligned from human values. So yeah, technology has a very good track record, but I think people have to, I hope these two groups of elites, because they are elites, are able to see more eye to eye. I do think things like AI will require careful and smart regulation.
Yeah. What is the best critique of the river?
There are a few critiques. I think, one good critique is that these guys are they are mostly men. That's also another critique, is that it's very white and or Asian and male. But that these guys can be jerks sometimes that they don't know their own limitations, that they trespass into areas maybe like politics where they don't have a lot of expertise. I mean, I think that there's a lot to be said for that. I think also the fact that like it's kind of become a self-fulfilling prophecy where if you're a top VC firm, then literally in Silicon Valley, you get the best founders, the best talent from like all over the world. If you do that and you kind of get your pick of the litter, and then you are able to make a diversified set of bets. Any one company that you're founding is pretty risky, but if you can invest in 20 in a new fund every year and have 10 funds simultaneously, so you have 200 companies you're investing in, it's almost inevitable that if you're picking the best ones that you're going to have a lot of winning bets, as well as some where singles and doubles where you keep your batting average fairly high too.
Yeah, we've been talking to Nate Silver, election forecaster, author of the new book, On the Edge, The Art of Risking Everything. Congratulations, Nate, on getting this book out, and appreciate your taking the time.
Of course. Talk to you soon.
And just a reminder that signing up for Book of the Day Plus is a great way to support NPR's book coverage and public media, and you'll get to listen to every episode sponsor-free. So please, go find out more at plus.npr.org/Book of the Day.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Rosetta Stone, an expert in language learning for 30 years. Right now, NPR listeners can get Rosetta Stone's lifetime membership to 25 different languages for 50% off. Learn more at rosettastone.com/NPR.
This message comes from NPR sponsor Mint Mobile. From the gas pump to the grocery store, inflation is everywhere. So Mint Mobile is offering premium wireless starting at just $15 a month. To get your new phone plan for just $15, go to mintmobile.com/switch.